What is up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Another video means another dopamine hike, so the buy something that feels something. And today we're back at it with another review. For today's review, we are taking a look at Hasbro Star Wars The Black Series Djarin, based off of his appearance on the Glavis Ringworld, aka his appearance in the Book of Boba Fett. And if I'm being completely honest with y'all, this is my third ever Djarin figure I've ever owned. The first two being the one from 2019 before he got his Beskar armor, and then the release following that in 2020 with his Beskar armor. And the reason being is I don't really have the urge or see any reason to purchase any of the re-releases or variations of Djarin. Yeah, they're cool and they come with some cool accessories that kind of give you a reason to purchase them, but it's not enough for me to spend $20 plus on Djarin covered in some kind of element or hazard, or have them painted in a different color, and they come with a few little accessories that I can honestly live without. Don't get me wrong, some of the accessories in these re-releases are cool, but they're just not enough to pull me in to make that purchase. The only time I've ever come close to making a purchase of a re-release of Djarin before this one was the 2-pack with him and Grogu, and it comes with Grogu's cradle. You can take off Din's helmet. It comes with some Beskar plates. I thought it was neat, but at the end it just didn't really see the reason to make that purchase, because I already had Din in his Beskar armor, and I know how popular Grogu is and how much he is loved by the community, but he wasn't enough to really pull me in to make that purchase. So yeah, before today's video, I only owned the 2019 and 2020 standard standalone releases of Djarin. And funny enough, while working on this video, this isn't even the latest release of Djarin. Hasbro did recently announce another re-release of him based off of his appearance in the 3rd season of The Mandalorian. And unfortunately, I can already tell that that figure is going to be a downgrade in comparison to today's figure. So I'm very grateful to have the figure that we are taking a look at today. So at any point during or after the video you realize you do want to pick up this figure for yourself, you can for $24.99 off of Hasbro or Entertainment Earth, $25.99 off of the Big Bad Toy Store, $26.99 off of the GameStop website, $32.24 off of Amazon, and $39.99 off of Walmart. And to be completely honest, I don't think that's Hasbro selling this version of Djarin for $39.99 off of the Walmart website. That was just the top result when looking for him on the Walmart website. So if you can find them for cheaper there, power to you. And with all that being said, let's move on to opening up this bad boy. And one last thing I want to make very clear before we get into the review is throughout most of this video, I will be comparing this figure to the standalone 2020 release of Mando, because it was the last standalone unaltered release of Mando before this figure, and I feel comparing this figure to any variant / altered figures or figures that were included in a 2 or 3 pack is unfair, because those releases obviously are different and offer things that a standalone release of Mando can't / couldn't offer. So I will be comparing this figure to the 2020 release, because I feel like that was the last standalone standard release of an unaltered Djarin. So forgive me if I don't, compare this figure to your variant or altered or deluxe version of Djarin. So taking a look at the packaging, we can see it's the Book of Boba Fett themed with that nice green. We have the figure with everything included. We have the title and what appearance he made in the show. And then we have some artwork on the side, some artwork on the back, and a brief description of what our boy is all about during the events of Book of Boba Fett. And with all that, everything again looking like it's in the package. So let's open this bad boy up. When it comes to the head articulation, you can rotate the head 360 degrees, which is always nice to see. And then we can have them look up and down a decent amount as well. And then going over to the head tilt, I do like the range there as well. And that all allows for a nice spherical rotation. So overall, I am very happy with the head articulation on this figure. Some of the best that we have seen. When it comes to the arm articulation on this figure, you can get the 360 degree rotation with the arm. You just have to be careful not to break that shoulder plate. That'd be very bad if you did break that. So again, be very careful with the shoulder plate on this figure. And then when it comes to the elbow bend, you can bring the forearm past the 90 degree mark. So I'm happy with the elbow articulation here. And you can even have the arm, you know, bend back a little bit if you want him to look like he is breaking his arm. And then you can rotate the elbow 360 degrees as well with the forearm. And then when it comes to the hands, you can rotate 360 degrees and bend the wrist however you please. So very nice to see that there. I almost forgot to show you that you can bring up the arm a decent amount, which means you can open up the arm a decent amount as well. So forgive me, but yeah, no, that is also achievable with this figure's arm articulation. And overall, I am extremely happy with the arm articulation on this figure. When it comes to the torso articulation, you can't have Mando rotate 360 degrees because of the strap around his torso, but you can have him lean back and forth a bit and tilt side to side, so at least that is still there. It isn't the worst torso articulation. There is worse torso articulation out there. I'm looking at you, Jazzwares, but overall, not the end of the world, but still kind of sucks to see nonetheless, but at least there is some range here. And then looking at the leg articulation, you can't fully 360 degree spin the legs, but you nearly can, so the range is still really good nonetheless. And then the move down from that at the thigh, you can rotate it 360 degrees, which is nice to see. And then moving away from that, you can bring the legs up, so if you want him to sit in a chair or off the ledge of a cliff or anything like that, you can have him do so. And then when it comes to our splits for Djarin, I want to say he passes the halfway mark. It's not a full split, but you know, almost there, so good range nonetheless. And then moving down to the knee bend, and the knee bend is good. You can get him in a bunch of action poses, running poses, anything like that is achievable with the knee bend here. And then you can rotate the lower leg 360 degrees. And then when it comes to his foot, you can rotate that 360 degrees and bend the foot however you please. So overall, very happy with the leg articulation on this figure. My overall and honest thoughts on this figure's articulation is it is near perfect. The only thing holding it back from being like what I would consider the perfect Black Series figure articulation wise is the torso, and how it's somewhat limited by that leather strap, not allowing them to rotate 360 degrees, or rotate at all I should say. Granted, he can still lean back and forth and side to side, so you can still get some movement out of him, which is why I'm being somewhat lenient towards this one thing. But after that, when it comes to the head articulation, the arm articulation, the leg articulation, I absolutely love it. I have zero complaints, and just really makes this figure shine. So yeah, good job, Hasbro. I just wish there was a way that you could have him rotate his torso. And for our first accessory, we have Din's jetpack, and this thing is looking good. I have no complaints whatsoever about the sculpt work on this accessory. And as for the paint job, obviously it is going to be the same tone as silver as the rest of his armor, because the jetpack is mostly made up of Beskar. And overall, I have no complaints with the visuals of this accessory. And when you compare this release's jetpack to the 2020 release's jetpack, you can see the immediate difference in quality. And you can tell just by looking at the 2020 release that the sculpt work isn't as sharp or as defined. The smaller details aren't as clear as they are on this current release. And even looking at the paint job, the 2020 release's jetpack is a kind of darker shade of gray. It doesn't really match the Beskar tone that is on the figure's armor, whereas on this current release, the jetpack is the same tone of silver as the rest of the armor, because the materials that the jetpack and the armor are made out of are the exact same. So without a doubt, this current release's jetpack is already a vast improvement. And one thing that I really like about this jetpack is once it is in the figure, it stays on. It doesn't feel like it's gonna fall off at any time. And also the fact that you can have the jetpack and the cape on at the same time. You couldn't do that with the 2020 release because the material the cape was on, it was one or the other. But with this figure, you can have both on and have them look absolutely stunning. So that is very nice to see on this figure. And another thing I really like about this jetpack is if you have the deluxe Return of the Jedi Boba Fett figure that came with the thruster effects for his jetpack, you can apply those thruster effects to this jetpack as well. The only difference between this jetpack and every other ones that I've seen is that you can't articulate the thrusters, but at the end of the day, I still think that this is a very cool thing that they decided to include. And then for our next accessory, we have Djarin's blaster, also known as the IB-94, and this thing looks amazing. I absolutely love the amount of little details they got sculpted into the blaster. It's itself. They even sculpted in some of the wood texture in the handle of the blaster, so credit where credit is due. This is probably one of the best looking blasters Hasbro has ever made, at least one of the best looking blaster pistols. And a nice little thing is that if you want this blaster on your figure but not in his hands, you can place it in his holster on the side and it fits in nice and snug. It doesn't feel like it gets stuck once it's in there. Comes out nice and easily, and overall a great holster for this blaster. And then for our next accessory, we have Din's knife, and Hasbro definitely put more effort into the visual presentation than I expected them to for a knife. Not that it's a bad thing, it's just I feel like they could have gotten away with less and I would have been content nonetheless with this accessory. But at the end of the day, when it comes to visuals, I have no complaints. And there is one issue I do have with this accessory, and it's the fact it doesn't like sitting in Din's hand very firmly. It likes to fall out and wobble around at times. I do have photos of him holding the knife, but I did have to position his hand very carefully in order for it to stay there. So that's just one thing to keep in mind when trying to display this figure with the knife. If you do want to display him with it, you just have to be very careful or else you will drop it, and it is a very small accessory, so you can lose it very easily, so just be very careful with this accessory. But one thing that I do like about this accessory is the fact you can sheath it. So for people like me who are not going to try and display it in his hands, you can sheath it in his boot, so you can still have it on the figure nonetheless and appreciate it to some extent. And then for our final accessory, we have the dark saber, and I am pretty content with the visual presentation of this saber. The detailing on the handle, the hilt looks great. The blade is nice and simple, not trying to do any overcomplicated, visual effects. Just gets the point across. And like most lightsabers in the Black series, you can remove the blade from the handle. So if you just want him holding it while it's not ignited, you can do that as well. And my only issue with this accessory is similar to the knife. Mando does have a hard time holding it unless you position it correctly. I will say it's not as big of an issue with this accessory because the handle is wider than the grip on the knife. But I figure I'd give y'all a heads up nonetheless about that. And like the rest of the accessories included, you can display them on Mando without having to have it in his hands via this little hook around his belt. Just be careful, because if you do shake around or play around too much with the figure, it will come off, and it is a small accessory, so you can lose it easily. But I still think it's cool nonetheless that you can display this on him in some way. So when it comes to the accessory selection for this figure, I couldn't be any happier. I feel like that this selection of accessories is far better than the one that we got all the way back in 2020. I feel like if there was one accessory Hasbro could have added to improve this selection, it would have been the Beskar spear, but that's not something I necessarily need to make this figure absolutely amazing. This figure already has so much going for it. It's just if I were to add anything, it would be that one accessory. So despite enjoying this accessory selection over the 2020 release, I feel like the only thing that the 2020 release has over this figure in the terms of accessories is the fact that it came with Din's rifle. But granted, I have the 2019 release that also came with Din's rifle, so even if I were to miss out on the 2020 release, it wouldn't be the end of the world because I would still have that rifle accessory. And the reason why I bring this up is because on the back of this figure, there is a peg hole for Mando's rifle. So if you did want to display it, whether it's from the 2020 release or the 2019 release, you can display him with the rifle, and boy does he look really good. And one last thing that I really like about all the accessories included with this figure is you can actually have him not hold any of the accessories in his hands but still have them on him in some way or form, whether it's the holster for the blaster, the sheath for the knife, or the hook for the dark saber. So at the end of the day, very happy with the selection of accessories for this figure. The visual presentation for all these accessories is phenomenal. I really wish that the grip on Mando's hands was a little tighter for the knife and dark saber, but you can still display them in his hand nonetheless, so it isn't necessarily the end of the world. You just gotta be careful when it comes to displaying those accessories. And again, very happy that you can have every accessory on this figure without them having to be in his hand, so you don't need to have a little baggie for his accessories, because again, you can display them all on him. And with all that said, let's move on to the next segment. So when it comes to this figure's visual presentation, I have to say this is probably the best looking Black Series figure that we've ever gotten to date. The color separation is great, from the silvers on his armor to the other accessories, the shades of brown in his clothes, straps, and boots, the blue that just pops out on his knee and waist. Whoever really worked on the paint job did such a great job with the color separation and all the different shades. Of course, following the paintwork is sculpting, which I also believe was executed really well, from the line work and the layering in his armor to the wrinkles in his clothes and leather accessories. And even looking at his gauntlets, the amount of detail Hasbro got down is just amazing and really adds to why I love this figure. And finally, the thing I would consider the cherry on top for this figure is the cape. With every release before this one, Hasbro would use a plastic pre-positioned cape that looked okay, but lacked expression, and if you really wanted Din to wear the jetpack, you either had to remove the cape altogether or carve around it, which I never did, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone has. But with this release of Mando, Hasbro made the cape out of cloth and it looks amazing. You could have him wear the cape and the jetpack at the same time, and you can position it accordingly to however you want to pose in. All in all, this cape is a massive upgrade in comparison to what we were originally getting, and honestly, this upgrade is mostly the reason why I decided to pick up this figure. And the weird thing is that for their latest release that Hasbro put out for Din for Mando Season 3, they went back to using the plastic cape, which in my opinion, in comparison to this cape, is a massive downgrade. So if I were to recommend any release of Din to anyone, I would absolutely recommend this release. By far the best, figure that we've gotten in the Black Series so far, and the best release of Din to date. So let's put this bad boy into scale with some size comparisons. And let's start off by comparing him to some other Black Series figures. First off with an Imperial Stormtrooper, then we have an Imperial Death Trooper, then an Imperial KX Security Droid, a Gaming Grades Republic Commando Battle Droid, then we have Chrysanthemum, Wrecker, Omega, an Imperial Astromech Droid, and then finally a Mouse Droid. Then we have Bandai's 1/12th Djarin model kit, NECA's Alien Xenomorph Warrior, NECA's Predator 2 Elder Predator aka Greyback, Jazzwares' Halo the Spartan Collection Halo 3 Master Chief, Jazzwares' The World of Halo Halo Infinite Master Chief, and finally we have McFarlane's The Doomslayer. So here we are at the turntable segment of the video. This is pretty much where I go over what I like, dislike, pros, cons, strengths, weaknesses, however you want to word it. Basically, I go over the positive and negative aspects of this figure. And just because I don't like dwelling on the negative longer than I already need to, I want to get the sour stuff out of the way first. And if I'm being completely honest, the things that are in the realm of negativity for this figure aren't even the worst things in the world for a figure. The first thing being that you can't rotate the torso 360 degrees. You can still have him, lean back and forth and side to side, but you can't achieve that, 360 degree spin. I don't think you can really spin the torso at all, but there is still some torso articulation nonetheless at the end of the day. And the other thing that does come to mind is the fact that he at times will struggle holding the Darksaber or the knife, and the reason why I don't think that's completely the end of the world is because if you do position the hand right, he can hold those accessories without them falling out. You just again have to position the hand carefully, but understandably I can still see why people would find this annoying. But after those few things, there's nothing really else in the realm of negativity that I can think of when it comes to this figure, which means we can move over to the more positive things about this figure, which there's a lot. Starting off with the articulation, this figure, besides the limited range in the torso, he can express and move his head around a lot, he can express and move his arms around a lot, and the same goes for the legs. Those three areas you can articulate really well and just have very good range for a Black Series figure. And then when it comes to visual presentation, Hasbro absolutely knocked it out of the park. This is probably the best looking Black Series figure that we have seen to date. The paintwork is phenomenal when it comes to the color variation and separation from all the different silvers in his armor to the other accessories, the shades of brown in his clothes, straps, and boots. And like I said earlier, that blue that just pops out just looks absolutely phenomenal. And my overall favorite thing about this figure's visual presentation is the cape and how it is no longer made out of some pre-positioned plastic that looked okay at best. It's actually made out of cloth, and it just it allows you to wear the jetpack and the cape at the same time, and it just looks amazing on him. And then after a visual presentation, the accessory selection is also really great. I really enjoy how every weapon can be placed on him without him actually having to hold it. and you know, I feel like that this is probably one of the best accessory selections for a standalone standard release of Djarin. So despite the minor issues that I mentioned earlier when it comes to the big three departments of articulation, visual presentation, and accessories, Hasbro absolutely killed it. They without a doubt poured all their heart and soul into this figure, and I will say also without a doubt this is my favorite figure in the Black Series to date. If I were to make a list, this would be at number 1. And to no one's surprise, I obviously do recommend picking up this figure. If you have been on the fence about this figure, I highly recommend that, you know, you just get over that fence and make the purchase. Whether you are, you know, stumbling upon this figure in person or thinking about picking up online, which there are links in the description of the video for that, you know, just pick up the figure. I highly recommend it, especially since this is the only Din figure to have a cloth cape, so that already alone makes this way better than most of the other Din releases that we've seen in the past, at least in my opinion. But yeah, that's enough of me shilling this figure. I think I've done that for long enough, so let's wrap up the video. So if you did enjoy today's video, a like and a subscription would be awesome. You don't have to comment. I get it. It's a lot of effort moving those fingers. But if you do want to bounce off anything I did say during the video, you are more than welcome to. And I'll most likely reply to y'all's comments because obviously I like talking about this stuff. And if you want to see more content like this, there's plenty of it up on the channel. I've already reviewed a bunch of Star Wars The Black Series stuff. And also I do stuff from NECA, specifically from the Alien and Predator franchise. And I also do a handful of Halo stuff as well, so if any of that does interest you, you're more welcome to go check that out. And with all that being said, please have a wonderful day and stay hydrated. It's important.